Well, guys, I am so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining our webinar, our Masterclass series on RFID. I am here today. I'm Courtney Folk with Renewal Logistics, and I'm here today with Jonathan Aitken and Daniel Lusty, who are both a part of the Avery Dennison team. And I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about you, maybe your favorite TV show or the one that you're watching now. Could be great. Daniel, how about you?
So I'll jump in, Courtney. So my name is Daniel Lusty. I do market development at Avery Dennison under our solutions group. So I work with retailers and brands on their RFID journey, helping them from POC to global deployments. I've been at Avery for a little over 8 years now, and really excited and appreciate the opportunity to sit with you today.
That's awesome. What show are you watching now?
Oh, yes. So I've been watching Only Murders in the Building. And then also got back into watching the new episodes of We Are Wrexham.
Oh, cool. So the Only Murders in the Building, is that the one? That's the one with Selena Gomez and
Yes.
is it Steve Martin?
Steve Martin, yeah, you can't. Yeah, it's incredibly funny. If you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend it. It's a very, very funny show.
Oh, awesome. And the other one is We Are Wrexham? I haven't heard of that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
welcome to Wrexham. Yeah,
Welcome to Wrexham. Yeah, it's about a football club, and it's an incredible story about their journey through trying to get to the Premier League in the UK.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, so glad you're here. Jonathan, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Jonathan Aitken, I'm based in Vancouver in Canada. I am the Ecosystem Market Development Director and head of marketing partnerships for Avery Dennison, also in the Solutions Group. I'm also the chairperson of the RFID Alliance, which is the industry alliance for UHF RFID. It's kind of like the Wi-Fi Alliance or the Bluetooth Alliance, but the people that are specific about RFID. And I am watching Lessons in Chemistry right now, which is a new show streaming on Apple TV Plus. And it's about a person who almost got their PhD but then couldn't, and then struggles that she goes through in the 1950s, and then turns around and starts a baking show. And it's all about the fact that she really understands chemistry. And so I haven't seen any of the baking yet. The chemistry part is pretty cool, and there's a whole bunch of rowing scenes in it as well. So I love that because I'm a rower. So.
Oh, that's so fun. I was watching that show. Yeah, she's pretty tense in that show to start with. I'm wondering if she's going to start loosening up or if that's going to be it the whole way. What do you think?
No, and it's Brie Larson, right? She's had such a variety of different characters that she's played. Like she was like a superhero, and she's got awards. And I think she's going to be fun. So,
well, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And she was talking about, and that show has rowing in it, like you were saying, and like the word erg. I had never heard that word really before.
yeah,
So,
mention that to any rower and they'll cringe because erg means pain. It's short for pain.
interesting. Very interesting. I had no idea. That's
It's a dry
interesting.
land rowing machine that can be pretty painful if you push yourself pretty hard. So yeah, it's a
Gotcha.
good full body workout.
Well, very cool. Well, I'm Courtney Folk. I mentioned my company's Renewal Logistics. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Renewal Logistics, and our company is really the fulfillment for the fashion industry. So we have kind of an integrated solution for handling returns as well as forward logistics and the value-added services piece that kind of apparel needs that's a little more touchy-feely than most other items. And the shows that I'm watching right now, I'm watching Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, which I am a total Star Trekkie. I have loved Star Trek forever. Used to watch it growing up, and I feel like life is just kind of basically you learn everything you need to know from watching Star Trek.
Cool.
It's such a great show, and they've done everything. They've done a crossover episode with their cartoon one, and they've done a musical, which a lot of people hated, but I thought was fantastic. And I actually have some of the songs on my phone that I listen to sometimes. So I'm a big fan of that show too. I think it's very creative, and I love Captain Pike. There's a whole Instagram thing about Captain Pike's hair. So, because he's got like amazing hair that apparently takes like an hour for the makeup people to do. So yeah, it's awesome.
I had no idea, but you could tell there was a lot of work put into that hair. It really,
Yeah, for
really
sure.
had. And then the other show that I'm watching right now is the one called Fitness, and it's about the girl with the eating disorder from the 80s who becomes like a fitness tape celebrity, and it's really great. Rose Byrne, I think, is her name, and it's just a really interesting show. It feels a little bit like, I don't know if you guys ever saw that show Weeds from a really long time ago, but like she's always one step in front of a lie, and it stresses me out a little bit to watch that. I'm a little too honest for that show, but it's really interesting. It's been fun to watch so far.
The fingers on that show are intense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always like, what is about to come next? Very fun. Well, today, I guess we'll just kind of jump in a little bit, and hopefully everyone has been able to gather and get on board that was hoping to attend today. So we'll just kind of go ahead and start talking a little bit about what we're doing here. But I think in our conversations, Daniel, when we were in Little Rock, it just became apparent to me that there's just like this whole really rich world of how RFID can be used in facilities, whether it's like retail store environments or in warehouses, which, we're in the logistics space, so that's what I love. But I think most people just don't really know how RFID is really being used. Most companies who are brands that are selling into big retailers are being requested to add RFID to all of their items, and it's just kind of a pain point rather than being really seen as a value at this point. So I was hoping our goal today would be to kind of demystify the process, talk a little bit about like how RFID technology is being used on a daily basis now in the world around us. And then the third thing is to talk about some of these business value, use cases for it where people can really see an ROI. So we were really glad that you guys decided that you wanted to go on this journey with us and do this masterclass. I think it's just going to be so fun. In our prep calls, I have just enjoyed so much hearing the stories of how people are using things. So very excited. So I think, obviously you guys are the two best experts out there to demystify RFID technology. And, you know what, before we do that, I did want to talk about one thing. I wanted to talk about your backgrounds. Can you also tell everyone where you were before you were at Avery Dennison?
Sure. Yeah, so Jonathan and I both kind of come from a retail background. So prior to working for Avery, I worked for JCPenney. I worked in the retail ops and spent a little bit of time also in the merchant, did a bit of a tour of duty while I was there. And then prior to that, I worked for Kohl's department stores out in the field. So I've got a retail background, been in various roles from field to enterprise excellence. So, have a lot of stories from working on the retailer side, and it's really exciting to be on the vendor side now, working with the retailers to address some of their challenges now.
Very cool.
Yeah, I have a retail background as well, but I kind of came to it a funny way. I have a kind of a finance background, but I'm not a CPA. I'm an industrial engineer, so I have an industrial engineering degree from Stanford and then an MBA as well from the University of Utah. And I kind of started working for Accenture as a management consultant. I spent 5 years doing that, and then did some ERP work for another 5 years, 10 years at two different companies. And then I was working for a military contractor and doing lots of engineering there. And a bunch of people left, and they went to this yoga pants startup in Vancouver called Lululemon, and they said, "Hey, this is a disaster. We really need you to come and help." And so I ended up joining to become director of finance transformation and help to transform their finance department. And then one day the CIO called me into his office and says, "Hey, you've done a great job at this. I want you to take on this RFID thing." And I said, I don't know anything about RFID other than I can spell it. And so he said, "Well, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to spend a lot of time in the stores, and this is a real learning opportunity for you." And so January, I started in 2014, and we got the project approved, or January 2015, and 8 months later, it was a very long 8 months, we rolled out RFID technology, software, hardware, and tags. We'll talk about that in a minute, to a whole bunch of stores in the US and Canada, and a bonus one in Hong Kong, which was a nice little curveball in the middle of all that. So it was an amazing project, and some fantastic leadership across all my peers. So I ended up was director of IT for retail after that. And so I learned a lot about, everything in the stores, from POS to mobile devices to credit cards to, Apple Pay. We rolled out Apple Pay in the stores. It was one of the first ones to do that. Now it's everywhere. And so it was a very cool time. And then I left and I started doing some RFID consulting. And then I met Daniel's boss at an RFID show. And he said, "What are you doing consulting? You need to come work for Avery Dennison." And so I was like, great. And so 6 years later, here I am. And it's been an amazing journey. So
wow, that's so cool. That's awesome. And the thing that I love about both of your backgrounds is just that you both have this real world experience. So you know exactly where brands are today when they're looking at implementing this. And you've got Daniel talking about being on the sales floor and the warehouse floor. And then, Jonathan, with you've got like the CTO and CIO experience and like the full gamut of, so when your customers are making decisions, you kind of have walked in their path before, and you can kind of, you filled their shoes a little bit before. And I just think that's amazing. I think that's always just really great.
It's true. Like I was at a sales meeting at a brand in San Francisco, and after I left, the other sales guy said, "How do you know all this stuff? You are amazing." And I was like, well, I actually work for a retailer. So like when I talk about, the difference between replenishments and allocations, I understand that. I mean, one of the fantastic things about Lululemon is they kind of, in the early days, everybody had to work in the store. And that was part of like Chip Wilson's philosophies. Everybody in the store support center needed to have store experience. And so did everything from sweeping the floors to running the cash to opening and closing and do back to front replenishment. And so I know how painful it was before RFID. And certainly, now they don't have to do the walkie-talkie replenishment thing anymore, which was a real challenge for them. So
that's amazing. That's awesome. And guys, I think it would be great to just hear a little bit about Avery Dennison as a company as well. Can you guys share just a little bit about, I think most people are probably going to recognize the logo, but they may not know very much about the actual products that you provide and the company itself.
Yeah, it's always a challenging thing to describe a conglomerate that's a multinational. So, we're a $9 billion company. We're operating in 50 different countries. We have 36,000 employees, probably more than that. We're Fortune 500, I think in the 400 range. We're based here in the U.S. Well, I'm in Canada, but in the U.S. And, we call ourselves a material science and manufacturing company. But the division that Daniel and I are in is our apparel division and our material or our RFID division. And so we make a variety of different kinds of RFID tags, and then we sell them in our line of work into apparel companies. And so to help them manage their inventory. So it's apparel. It's also a bit of a lot of footwear, and then some beauty, as well as now we're expanding into grocery. And now there's a whole team working on logistics as well. So we're starting to see RFID tags grow from, just like primarily in apparel, now a bunch of other things. And we'll talk about that in a second. But
That's really cool.
A fantastic company to work for. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And I'll tell you guys just a little bit about our company too, just for the people who are following along today. We have about 2,400 workers. We're Atlanta based, but we do have an East Coast and a West Coast operation. We've been in business for 18 years. We actually started in the retail dry cleaning business and then became the largest restoration dry cleaning company in the U.S. that's independent. And then from there, we were approached by a very large, top 3 apparel company in the U.S. to handle their returns program. And so now we're their dedicated return center, as well as we handle a lot of forward logistics operations. And we actually won this year. We won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and we're very excited about that. Thank you. And the part of the reason for that was that through our history with returns, as well as working in the insurance restoration world, where we help customers get their lives back together after cleaning their apparel items that have been damaged in a house fire, we've saved millions of units from going into a landfill. And so the ESG ratings component of our business and our focus on ESG and sustainability initiatives has just really been something that kind of sets us apart from other companies. And then also we just have an amazing culture that we just drive very, very carefully. And we'll talk a little bit about the culture piece in a minute, but actually, why don't we just jump into that? We were talking before about values and just how, people like doing business with people that they like, know, and trust. And that, we like working for companies that we appreciate and understand their values. And so can you tell us just a little bit about Avery Dennison's values and maybe also how RFID really kind of connects you to those values? Because I think this is one of those topics where it can be a little nuts and bolts if you don't really start thinking about the larger impact of how it can help a company or help your customers. So
right. I think what's really interesting, Courtney, about the values at Avery is it's not a top down or a bottoms up approach. It's really woven into the fabric of how we operate as a company day in and day out. And I think also what's important to note is like not one of these values stand alone on its own.
Yeah.
And so to have excellence, you have to have teamwork. For teamwork, you have diversity. Diversity comes with integrity. And so all of these stand together. I think it's really interesting, and I don't know if I can pick one of my favorites. It's like asking your parents who their favorite child is. I'm not sure if I want to know the answer from my folks, but what I will say is really interesting about how you talked about Renewal Logistics and the work you're doing. I think one thing that's really interesting to note and the work going on in RFID is sustainability. So there's somewhere over, I think it's like 10 billion textiles created each year, and 92 million tons of that each year go to waste from overproduction. And so it's really interesting to see RFID in its early stages, which we'll talk a lot about as far as like what the use cases and how retailers are using it and brands are using it. But what's really exciting is starting to see sustainability come into the conversation and how brands or retailers can leverage that to solve some of those challenges. And so, again, not picking sustainability as my favorite child, but I think it's one of the ones that it's just interesting when you mention the work you're doing at Renewal, how RFID, I believe, will play into that.
That's very cool. And what about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's tough. We have 8 values, and we rolled them out about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, but it's been, I think they do really speak to how we work together, especially as a global company. Like teamwork is one that I really just value so much. I collaborate with Daniel and a lot of his peers on many different projects. But then the 2 that I really like are innovation and courage, because I think they kind of both, connect to each other. We're doing some really innovative work in the RFID space, and it takes courage to sort of move away from your sort of cash cow part of your business into something that's, a new and innovative piece, but we're seeing real value in it, and it differentiates ourselves from some of our competitors. And so it's absolutely a fantastic one for us. And so I'm quite close to people on our various innovation teams, as well as the different startups that we work with as well. So it's exciting.
That's very cool. Yeah. And I think I had mentioned that I was at a conference and it was like Fast Company was, they had one of the keynote speakers, and one of the speakers was talking about, he has a solution for a checkout option to where you don't even have to walk through a checkout. You just kind of plug your credit card in when you first walk in, and then as you leave the store, it tallies your items, and then bam, you're done, right? And he was talking about all the advantages of that, but he was saying how it's really hard for very large companies to have the courage to move and be the first one to move, because they like to see other companies do it and see the success that comes from another company and that story first before they make that move. So I think innovation and courage really do they very closely do connect for each other. And then on our side, we have a lot of core value. We have 6 core values, and but the main one that I love is bring relief. And I kind of feel like if we're not bringing relief to our customers, then we're not doing our job right. And if our employees are not bringing relief to their managers and their peers, they're not doing their jobs right. And so and also from a manager perspective, if you're a bad manager, you're not bringing relief to your the people who work for you. So for us, that's just a really important one. Are you really doing your job and delivering excellence and promoting trust and being adaptable? These are some of our others, but that one is a big one for me. And then I think from an RFID perspective, it's just amazing how much relief it actually does bring to companies that put it in place, because we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the Lululemon story of how they, use walkie-talkies to be able to tell on the store floor what replenishment needed to happen and how challenging that was, and probably very frustrating for the person doing it. And now it's a report can come out and you can just kind of see exactly what what's moved. And so I just think that's really fun. And part of what's fun about talking about this today is just how it does align with our company's values a little bit.
Yeah. I actually love your discretionary effort value as well, because I think so many times companies aren't empowering their staff to take that discretionary effort, and it means so much, and it takes so little to do that, like, it really builds brand loyalty. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think discretionary effort, it's kind of like I tell people we're building a rocket, we're building a race car, and discretionary effort is the fuel that drives the race car. Like if you're just checking a box, then the company's only going to get so far. So that's awesome. But you do have to make sure that people are you have to have people on the bus who all feel that way. So otherwise it's a problem. But anyway, jumping into RFID, let's talk a little bit about what it actually is. Daniel, would you mind telling us a little bit about what RFID technology is?
Yeah, absolutely. So radio frequency identification, also known as RFID, it's not a relatively new technology, Courtney. It's been around since, going back as far as the 1930s. You'd actually probably appreciate, I know you're into British history, and so actually it's thought that RFID was founded by a British scientist, physicist, who was working on a system for Allied fighter pilots to be able to identify friend or foe aircraft. And so that's kind of thought as the first use of RFID technology. And there's a lot of different RFID technologies out there. We're going to focus our conversation on what we're seeing in the retail and brand space as it pertains to like UHF. But I'm going to unshamefully steal from you, Jonathan, kind of the analogy or story you use when you talk about RFID, because RFID doesn't just compose of one product or one thing. It's a couple different items that compose an RFID system. And so Jonathan uses this, and I really always like it, is it's a three-legged stool. A stool doesn't stand alone on one leg. There's three legs that hold it up. And so in RFID, we have three different components. So it starts with an RFID tag. So we have a label here. You can see when we actually pull the label off the liner, there's an inlay on the back. There's a chip that actually stores the information that we program into it. And so this is kind of where the basis of things start, is in this RFID tag. And it can also come in a hang tag. So we actually will laminate the inlay into a UPC hang tag, or we even have them in a fabric label as well. But it starts with the RFID tag or sensor that we place onto the product. The next leg of that stool is some sort of reader and antenna. And so I have an RFID reader here that we use. So you have the reader, the antenna, and basically this will send out a radio wave that excites or turns on the RFID tag, which then makes the tag respond with some information. But this is the next leg of that stool, is having that RFID reader and antenna. And this comes in a lot of different forms. There's fixed readers, portal readers, things of that nature. But this is a handheld that's commonly seen or used in the retail space. And the last is software. So on this device, you would have some sort of software or middleware built into it that is going to aggregate the data into some sort of meaningful information and action that the user will take. So you need to bring something from the back room, bring it to the front room so the customer knows that it exists, or this item's out of stock. We need to send a replenishment order to the buyer to bring that item back into stock. So sorry, Jonathan, to steal your analogy there, but if there's anything I missed, please let me know or jump in.
No, we'll have to have a shootout with our dueling RFID guns.
Like laser tag, right?
We need to get Courtney one, and then we'll all have one.
Oh, man, yeah. That's really Star Trek over here.
Right. Really geek out, right? I love it.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, so that's really good to know. So there's the three parts. And then as far as like, one question I think that I even had when I first started having conversations with y'all was like, what's the real difference between like an RFID tag and a barcode? So
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you a little bit about it. I mean, so like, pick a card, any card. We've got some of the big brands here. These all have different kinds of RFID tags on it. This Levi's one has like a label on the back with a barcode. This Nike hang tag has a label as well. And then this Adidas one is like a built into the POS. Same with this Ralph Lauren and this Uniqlo one. But the difference is, both of these have a barcode on them, but inside it, they actually have the RFID tag, and it can be a little bit hard to see through it because it's paper on both sides. But if I hold it up to the light, I can see that there's the antenna and the chip inside it. So what we do, or the difference between the two, is that a barcode, in order for me to read this with a barcode reader, I have to be pointing a device like this that can also emit the barcode from here directly at it. But if I have an RFID tag, I can just pull the trigger and I can count like hundreds and hundreds of devices, right? And so I've just counted like 151 RFID tags. And so so the speed, and some of them are like in a box, down, you can't see it off camera. So, and it can be like 30 feet away. So like it's much larger range. You don't need to, you can see through a cardboard box, so you can read stuff that's inside the box. And that sort of one-to-many is what gives you that speed, right? It's just very, very reliable. Like you can get a high degree of accuracy in a very short period of time.
Very cool. Okay, I didn't realize that. So you don't have to actually scan every RFID unit like you do a barcode.
Not at all. I mean,
you can just wave a line.
If you couldn't, it would kind of really get rid of some of the benefits of RFID, because that is, the core piece is the rapid counting that allows you to do the counting much more often, right? So like a typical resale store will count once or twice a year. A typical RFID store will count as often as once a day, but usually once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on how much labor they want to spend. There were some Lululemon stores that were just so crazy busy, so much stuff going on, that I went in there. I was like, "What? You guys are counting again?" They're like, "Oh my God, we had to just bring a bunch of stuff forward. We just counted." And so, but we had a regular count on Sunday night that then updated the replenishment process down to the buyers to then send new product to the stores. So,
okay, wow.
And that ability to always true up your inventory, which starts to degrade over time, is the real power of RFID, because it then enables all these other things. It enables back to front replenishment. It enables things like omni-channel, picking where you can find an item, but also the fact that you can say, "Hey, I've got 4 of these left in the store, so let's go ahead and try to sell them online," right? And so that idea, like ship from store or buy online, pick up in store, you can do that without having to deal with safety stock, which we'll talk about in a second. So yeah, there's lots of fantastic things about getting much better data.
And what exactly is programmed into an RFID chip?
Yeah,
that's a really good question. Dan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one, Jonathan. So what's really unique about RFID, in addition to, as Jonathan, you were mentioning, the ability to rapidly count items, the other differentiator from a UPC, traditional UPC or EAN number, is that RFID takes it to another level, Courtney. So in a traditional barcode today, that number that GS1 helps a retailer brand put together, there's a series of numbers that identify who made the item, and then there's like a SKU number or an item reference number and a check digit in there. So today in a traditional UPC barcode, I know I have a medium blue shirt, where RFID also adds another layer, a different way of approaching it is it adds a serial number to it. So in a EPC or an electronic product code, we pull down the company prefix, we still pull down that SKU number, but then we add a serial number, and we basically, from that, we're creating a digital identity or creating a birth certificate for that product and giving it its own serial number. And so no longer do I just have a medium blue shirt, but I have a medium blue shirt serial 10, and there's no other medium blue shirt serial number 10 that we create. And so you create a unique product. So in addition to like what Jonathan was mentioning as far as the benefits of RFID on products and doing rapid cycle counts, RFID also allows you to get uniqueness to the product and lets you get down to a serial level base on it. So all we're doing is taking the current, G10 or UPC, pulling that down and adding a serial number. So we're not doing anything super tricky when you look at, creating an EPC number.
Yeah, I mean, I think like here's 2 Ralph Lauren products with barcodes on them that also have RFID inside them. They're actually unique because the serial numbers are different, even though the barcodes are the same. So,
okay,
a lot of people think, oh, RFID is tracking me. There's so much information on here. It's not actually. Like, you still rely on the traditional pointer back to the data in the database of this barcode number, that unique item number that does all the lookups in your SAP or your Oracle or your POS or anything like that. It's just that added serialization allows you to get to the unique, the each. And so when I wave my handheld device over these 2 things and it counts, you'll actually be able to see, hey, there's 2 of them and there's not 4 of them. Because with a barcode scanner, you could actually accidentally scan the same barcode twice. And the barcode is like, hey, you scanned me again. It doesn't care. Where RFID actually cares that you scanned it and it tells the system what to do. So.
That's really cool. Okay, so it's like the same information that you have in a barcode plus a serial number on the end.
Yeah,
and that's what gets you. And so I could see like Easter egg hunts, right? Like the one item in the store has a which one is it today? It's just this one serial number. Go find it.
It's entirely possible. I mean, there was one time during the Christmas holiday where Lululemon was selling these mittens, and my boss, the CIO, was standing in the store watching this process, and the store associate said, we know that there's one in this store because RFID tells us that it has it. And they just took, that is like the source of truth. And so, and she said, but I'm not sure where it is. They should be over here. And she says, well, hang on one second. I'm going to go get this. So she pulls out this device. She pops in the item number, right? Just the item number. And she says, yeah, it says there's one. I'm going to find it. And she pulls the trigger, and then it goes into this feature called Geiger count or find mode. And it actually will like start beeping. And it's like beep, 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 beep.
Oh,
and then she lifts up this pile of hoodies. Underneath there's the mittens. And my boss goes, that is amazing. And the customer is delighted. It's like such an amazing experience when you can do that. And it's like technology solving a problem in a very short period of time and saving, all those labor hours of like, well, let me go look in the back, right? It's like, no, I know we have and I can find it.
And if it was Lululemon, I'm sure they were like $100. So, I mean, you just...
Well worth it.
I don't think for mittens, but,
Well, to your point on that, Courtney, I think that's what's really interesting. That's a really great feature. And I think that's where we see a lot of folks light up when we show them the technology. But even when you think about like clearance sections and you want to sell to the last SKU, and you get an omni-channel order and you're, thinking about these clearance racks, trying to find it, to be able to enable the technology to walk in the area, use that Geiger feature, and at least if you hear one click, it's there versus you walk around and you can't find it and then canceling the order and disappointing that customer. So that's actually one really neat feature that RFID brings to a retailer, that anytime we show it to them, their eyes really kind of light up, like Jonathan was mentioning, as far as what it can do and what it enables the brand to provide from a customer experience standpoint, right? So
it's amazing. And so as far as like so we talked a little bit about how RFID works. Do you want to show us, like, I think you kind of showed us with the reader, but like, so I have a question for you about this. So like we have a warehouse, we have a 3PL facility. So we inbound items all day long. Almost everything in our building is flat packed. So you might have one case that's full of underwear and it may have 200, barcodes, or not barcodes, but RFID tags in that one case, and it's very dense. So I was asking Daniel about this before in terms of like how often do you see struggles with being able to scan these very densely packed items? Like if you have racks in a warehouse, you got case after case of these 200 items in a case. So like, and it was a really cool story. I don't know if you would mind telling us again about like how you can actually put an antenna on a forklift as it's driving and picking orders. You're able to do your scans at that point.
Yeah, I mean, brands, distribution centers have gotten incredibly creative over the years. The technology has come a really far way, as far as what the readers and antennas are capable of doing, what the sensors, the tags we put on it. And so any time we walk into a distribution center or a retailer, like we're really big into, we don't believe in technology for the sake of just having technology. Like we've really got to be solving problems. And so we look at what the challenges are, whether it be in a store or in a distribution center, and kind of see where we can set up the best way to read. So in some cases, it's inbound choke points or outbound choke points. But in the case that you and I think spoke about before is, wanting to rapidly cycle count a distribution center, which in the past has been a little bit of a challenge, as you mentioned, density, you've got environmental things as far as metal racks and other things that create some challenges. But we've seen a lot of folks and solution providers get creative in doing just as you mentioned, as far as being able to put readers onto pallet jacks and things of that nature. So as they're walking around doing their daily jobs in the distribution center or forklifts, they're constantly cycle counting. We've actually seen, I saw recently a company that was doing some work in using drones. So they go up at the end of the night or early in the morning before folks come in, and it's going around. Jonathan has done some work with a partner of ours that does a lot in robotics. And so I would say where there's a will, there's a way. And we're always looking at, what is the pain point and how do we best solve it? But there's a lot of really neat things going on in the distribution centers today to enable RFID.
Yeah, we're eating our own dog food too. We have RFID in some of our warehouses as well, and so we're shipping like massive rolls, and big huge roll of paper kind of looks the same to another big huge roll of paper, but it's not. And so we have technology in place with RFID tags and readers in the forklift, so it makes sure that it puts it in the right slot, and when it goes to find it, you're picking the right order, and it gives like a visible like green check mark or red X. So amount of training and sort of tribal knowledge and all that kind of stuff, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Like it's a much easier to train the forklift drivers, and the warehouse manager absolutely loves it. So.
And I thought the technology piece was really interesting too. Like, so you have a scanner, you have an antenna that's picking up like a certain foot radius, right? And then within that, so you may go down 2 aisles and you may like double scan, but the RFID technology allows you to be able to, it wakes up the tag and then you can tell it to go to sleep and not respond again, which I thought was so cool. Like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's like RFID 101, and then there's like, technical
like, how deep do we want to go?
Settings and, yeah. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff, but we have a couple different products that help with that too. We have a tunnel product that can isolate. So when a box goes in, it reads everything and then it stops reading. And it's like, it's kind of like when you go and you take your bag at the airport and you put it through the X-ray, but instead of an X-ray, it's an RFID reader. And then we know, okay, there's supposed to be 100 items in this box. We only saw 98. Then we actually have another one that looks kind of like a microwave oven, but you stick it in there and you press a button and it kind of zaps it from all sides, and it can say, yeah, there's definitely 100 in there. And so like there's processes that you can do to verify that. And then if you still don't see 100, then you can take it apart and do like an interrogation with a handheld. So it's pretty powerful. And a lot of times it's correct, but you want to identify the discrepancies, and you want to identify that vendor of yours who's like always shorting you when they think you don't know, and you can tell that really easily with RFID.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just a few items in term that you find that you were shorted makes up for the cost of the tags. So yeah, that's great. And you brought up like airports and how sometimes airports are using RFID now. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the ways that RFID is being used just out in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely all around you, right? I mean, I have a whole stack of tags here that I literally rescued from my teenage daughter's recycling. So like literally like all of these, and it's a variety of brands that you may know, but it's not just apparel. Apparel is the largest volume right now, but there's a lot of other ones that are out there as well. And there's a lot of innovative uses in apparel as well. And so if you go into a Uniqlo, or if you go into a Decathlon, or you go into a Zara store, they're doing self-checkout with RFID. We just announced a partnership with Amazon for their Just Walk Out for stadiums. And so for apparel that you're buying in stadiums with Amazon, it's being powered by RFID as well. So, but there's other things that are really interesting, like baggage tags, for example. So Delta Airlines is one of the largest users of RFID technology. And not just in baggage tags, but also they're tagging the life jackets and the oxygen masks. So they can actually count an entire plane, make sure that some teenager hasn't stolen a life jacket, like I may or may not have done when I was a teenager, from a plane as like a souvenir to hang in your room in college, right? So, all those kinds of things are really important, right? And so, but they're very tedious. And how long does it take? And verifying, has this expired? RFID can just tell you all that stuff so fast. And, at Lululemon, we used to have an expression coined by my friend Alpha, and she used to say, RFID don't lie. And it's like, it always reads the right thing. And, we did a comparison in a store one time between RFID tagging and the manual barcode reading by a professional barcode auditing company that we had hired, that most retailers hired this company to do twice a year. And we compared the numbers, and the guy's like, there's 3, and you're saying that there's 4. And I go, well, what about the one on the ground? And he looks and he's like, that one fell off the rack. Dang, you're right. And so that's when RFID don't lie. But, it's in a bunch of different technologies. You go into a hotel, like, that short range tap to open a door in your hotel room, to pay for stuff now too. It's different kinds of RFID. Sometimes there's different ranges that are out there. And, the one that's in use the most is the UHF RFID, which is sometimes called RAIN RFID as well. It's like, that's the brand name or the alliance name for it. So, yeah.
Okay. And I think, like, for me, like, one place I could really see, you always hear about blockchain, or it becomes very popular for 5 minutes when the coins or whatever are super valuable, and then they die, and then no one talks about it, and everybody's embarrassed about it, and then the cycle keeps happening. But, like, the one thing I think about the blockchain that is interesting from a supply chain standpoint is, like, so in our world, one of the value-added services that we do for customers from time to time is they'll have mold contamination come in on their apparel items. And so we can restore those for them so that they're still sold first quality. And then what we can do is we can provide the documentation to be able to help them be able to subrogate back to the source of who actually put the contamination into these units, because mold doesn't just grow on its own. The spores have to start somewhere. So, like, we were talking about this, Daniel, about how, like, one time we did a project where there were these leather tags on these pants, and that leather, just between the time when it was made in the factory and got to the US, it covered these items with mold. And so that manufacturer of the leather patch was actually the source. They were the ones who were providing contaminated leather, and being able to, like, have RFID on every single component within an apparel item. I bet that could also definitely be the case with electronics at some point, to be able to see, like, failure and where it started in the production process would just be
100%.
amazing.
And I think Courtney and share a very similar vision that we have at Avery, where we believe at some point all products will be connected. And, that's where things start with RFID, as far as we're creating these digital identities, as we call them, on all the products. And then how do you start layering that into the subcomponents of that particular product and start having better traceability and visibility as to where or how or who created that subcomponent of the master component, right? So it's really interesting to hear your point of view and how you guys are approaching it, because we share a very similar interest and vision as to where we think the industry will go. And so this is the start of that, as far as creating that master digital identity. But then how do we start breaking down into sub identities or components of that master identity?
I mean, there's nothing to say you can't put RFID transactions into a blockchain. I mean, one of the things that makes RFID super cool is that it's unique, right? And it's guaranteed unique because of the serial number. And so that's one other thing about a blockchain entry, is it's also unique, and it's immutable. So you can't change it once you stick it in there. But you don't have to have a blockchain in order to do RFID. There's a standard out there. It's called EPCIS. And it's basically an information system repository for EPC data. And so we actually have that as a cloud product offering that we offer. It's on Microsoft Azure, so it's available around the world. you can put your RFID data into it, and you can then read it out later. You can read it in a factory, in a distribution center, warehouse, fulfillment center, or store. And then you can tie that to, if you have, your brand has both RFID and a 2D barcode, like a QR code or a data matrix code, you can actually then get a consumer experience that can then pull all that data out. And so, and then in addition to that, you were talking about the leather patch. So you don't buy a leather patch, you buy pants with a leather patch on it. And so that leather patch comes from like a tier 2 or tier 3 supplier to that factory. And so you can tie that data together as well, all within our system. Obviously, it takes a lot of like data management, and some of it is garbage in, garbage out. But if you can get that kind of data cleaned up, you can actually get a ton of value from it. Because amazing. It's on Microsoft Azure, there's a whole ability to apply artificial intelligence to filter through all this massive amount of data and actually get to the stuff that's really valuable, what you need.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, so talking about just like, bringing it back to like the everyday, let's talk about like the stores and SKU accuracy and just how you've seen a different, how RFID has changed that. So like, Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like,
yeah, absolutely. So Courtney, I think one thing that's really interesting about what's going on in the RFID space and how really it got its popularity with a retailer or brand is, as many of you know from the retailer side, they do RFID, or excuse me, they do cycle counts, once a year. And so we've done a lot of studies, Accenture amongst others have done a lot of studies to kind of understand what is the SKU level accuracy in a retail store. And for most retailers and brands, we see about a 65% SKU level accuracy. So with RFID, you can bring that up to.
Okay, so you're saying that a store, if you walk into a store that doesn't have RFID, they have 65 to 75% accuracy of actually what's in the building at that moment?
Yeah, and there's a lot of studies from Accenture and others who have gone in and done work to actually see if that's actually accurate. And so what happens, Courtney, is so once a year, these retailers do their inventory, typically in January, February, when inventory is the lowest. And so what happens is they do their inventory in January, February, get it back up to that high 90%. And typically we see about a 3 to 4% SKU level degradation. And so each month after January, February, when they do that, it just starts going down until they get to September, wow. October, November, when it's the most critical selling period. It drops down. And then they don't redo it again.
The worst amount of accuracy.
Right. So,
yeah. So you're saying every month it drops 3 to 4% somewhere in there, and that's
bad receiving. Theft is a big one. I mean, with the theft that's going on right now, it could be even more than that, honestly.
Wow.
And then somebody comes in and it's like, hey, there's a big line. Look, I bought this medium and I actually need a large, and the store says, yeah, that's fine. Just like swap it, And
gotcha.
That's like a net zero transaction, so why bother? Yet you've just now messed up 2 different levels of your inventory, right? And so all those things happen in a retail store.
Yeah, and so RFID gives you that ability that each and some retailers are doing it weekly, some do it every other week, some do it monthly. So you have the ability to, what used to take through a physical count, 2 or 3 days to do, you can now do in a matter of 30 minutes, an hour, go around, cycle count all your products and get that inventory actually back up to the high 90s. And then really we're seeing for world-class omni-channel retailers, they don't have an omni-channel program without RFID or a world-class one, because you can't really promise the customer that they can come show up in your store and purchase that item, whether it's a buy online, pick up in store, or a ship from store, or curbside pickup. And so this kind of gives trip assurance to the customer by getting your inventory accuracy and exposing that inventory online and keeping it at that high 90 percentile, whereas, we mentioned or talked about is typically in the 65, 70% range.
Wow. Amazing. And so one thing that you said that I thought was so interesting in our prep calls for this was, and I'll just kind of characterize it, but like you were talking about how before RFID, you would have like your fulfillment center, and then you'd have your stores. And right before like a busy season, your stores would just push all the inventory out to, or excuse me, the distribution centers would just push all the inventory out to the stores. And so you were just kind of hoping to kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and make sure that the store had enough inventory. And now that's a lot more carefully managed, and you can actually, you're not having excess supply in one place that then you're having to figure out how to like travel it to another location. Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
As
I
well?
mean, retailers have a lot of work at the moment around selling to the last SKU, and so as you look online and you see what's available, you have a market. You hear it a lot of times on earning calls when retailers are struggling. You hear the news or talk about how a weather pattern in a specific market has caused challenges, and so really RFID, by giving you better accuracy and visibility, eliminates that. So I can now expose my inventory to the West Coast that I have on the East Coast. And so if I have a weather event that's preventing me from selling jackets in the South, I continue to expose and show that inventory as available, and I can pull and fulfill from those stores that aren't selling the product, because I have a better level of inventory accuracy. And so we use, or we call in the retail industry, safety stocks. And so traditionally what retailers will do is when you look online and it says that they have an item in stock, typically they put in what we call the safety stock, and it hides or shadows what's really in it. So I have 5, but I have to have at least 3 to show that I have inventory. And so if I drop below 3 and I have 2, well, I just will say that I have 0 on hand. And so what happens is you create this inability to sell to the last SKU and kind of miss sales opportunity, disappoint the customer by hiding that stock. So RFID gives you the ability and enables a retailer to show, if I have one in stock in Dallas, Texas, then I'm going to continue to show it until it's either pulled off the rack and purchased, or I sell it online and I request an associate to go pull that item and ship it to a customer. I know, Jonathan, you have a ton of experience from Lulu, and I don't know if you would add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever experienced this was actually in a large DIY retailer. I won't shame them by saying their name, but the guy said, I'm looking for this on your app and I don't see it. And he's like, well, hang on. And he pulls up something on his computer. Oh yeah, we got 2 of them. And I was like, but it says 0. He's like, yeah, but look at this. And twist it around and it's like said safety stock. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, okay. So imagine that scenario multiplied by like thousands of SKUs in hundreds of stores or thousands of stores. And then that's how much you're hiding from your e-com. And so because you don't trust it, you don't trust your inventory.
And so I would imagine those items that are hidden ultimately probably go on sale or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. They get marked down, right? So it's like, a puffy jacket that was pushed to Florida. No one buys it in Florida, and so, but somebody in Maine really wants it. Now with online and the ability to aggregate that data very rapidly down to the very last unit and push it into your distributed order management system. Your Sterlings or whatever, your DOM system that connects your e-com. Your e-com would say, now fulfill from warehouse first, but then also fulfill from that Florida store and ship it to that customer in Maine. And it was actually pretty amazing because we could see this effect at Lululemon during the holiday season super easily, because the day before, like basically Christmas Eve or the day before that, we were able to, as employees, to buy stuff online, and they would actually like turn off that ship from store capability because we were buying from the same pool as a regular people, but they didn't want to ship from stores because it was going to take like 1 or 2 extra days. So you could actually see like a level of inventory just like disappear and then reappear again because of them turning off the ship from store capability. Like it is absolutely amazing. So,
and to me, I think like putting myself in a brand's shoes, right? Like if you're sitting here, oh, it's so painful to have to add this extra step in my process for this retailer. But you have to think that retailer's probably going to sell more of your merch and sell it for a higher price.
I mean, there's value in it for everybody. Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought was really interesting, Daniel, was when you were talking about like shoe displays, and how like you can take a wand and you can do a quick look and you can say, okay, actually, I have these 3 pairs of shoes that are in the back that never would have seen the light of day and never would have gotten sold if they weren't actually on the floor. And so that's another way that like it really is very valuable for a brand to have gone through this process, because they're getting more sell-through for their products.
True. And display compliance isn't just shoes. It could be, purses. I mean, all kinds of things that, you need to put out something because somebody wants to.
Yeah, I worked with a retailer who built their entire ROI and business case off of item on display, because their stores were really challenged with displaying what demo products they had. And so, they saw a double-digit sales increase alone just by enabling item on display and making sure that the customer knew that product was available.
That's amazing. And I think, so we've talked a lot about like the, some of the different environments where RFID can be used. And when all of our followers see this slide about end-to-end visibility on the retail side, I think it would be really good for you guys to talk just a little bit about, have we covered all of the different pieces from the retail level to the distribution to the factory level, or is there anything else in there that you would want to add about like how RFID can be helpful in those cases?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say when you look at the slide, it's like, oh my God, I would say don't panic, right? Like you don't have to do all of these things, but you can do some or all of them in all of these different pieces. So like on the left, there's a factory. In the middle, there's a distribution center or a warehouse, and you can see that little tunnel that's kind of like the TSA X-ray machine. And then on the far right is the store, and there's everything from self-checkout to the scanning that we talked about to the QR code pieces or lost visibility, and the receiving piece. So it's a journey. RFID is a journey, and you're not going to do it in a few days. It takes time, and it depends. And so that's why you work with people like Daniel, who's seen a lot of this before, and he's got tons of experience from other brands, as well as all of our associates all around the world. And so we know like how to help you build this business case. And the majority of it is in the retail store, but then there's huge value in the DC and massive value in the factories as well, in terms of rapidly packing and verifying.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, you hit on something really great as far as saying RFID is a journey. And that's when I work with the brand, that's precisely where I go with it, is that this is a journey. There's a lot of shiny objects and things that you can do. But what we like to do is really help build that business case. And what we look at and where we start is, how do we get RFID as close to your customer as possible so there's a higher ROI? And so a lot of times we start in store and then we build it back upstream to the DC, and then we build back up to factory level. So I would totally echo the fact that RFID is a journey. It's not a light switch you're going to turn it on and have everything working on day one, but a journey to get there.
So I would imagine it's a little bit like where, and Elon Musk is he's kind of controversial right now, so I probably shouldn't even bring him up. But, his whole thing with Tesla was like, I'm going to build a sports car, and then I'm going to take the money from the sports car to build like an everyday car, right? And it's kind of the same thing. It's like you can start on the retail side and make your money back on your investment and the RFID there, and then start implementing it in the warehouse. And then also, so slowly over time, you can start implementing into these other areas of your business.
It's a lot of times what I talk about is it's crawl, walk, run. And so just that, Courtney, is you start with like, where's the most value and bang for your buck? And then how do we start adding more to strengthen the ROI and create the payback, make the payback even stronger over time? But it really is kind of that crawl, walk, run approach that we like to take folks through.
And, I just came from an RFID conference in Germany where CNA was talking. And one of the things that he said is, in every country now where CNA has deployed RFID, they have an agreement with their auditors to eliminate those awful end-of-year third-party audits. And by the way, they cost like $500 or $1,000 per store, right? And so you just take that cost per store and you multiply it, plus the hourly time of the employees that have to be there to watch the auditors. That's huge savings, and that's a perpetual saving. That's from now forever, right? And so it's just incredible. And so, and it's not just that. I'm maintaining a spreadsheet of all the companies that are our customers that have been able to do this, and that's an incredible piece that, that using that alone, once you get to there, can then fulfill your ROI to then go back into your DC and do tunnels, or go back into your factory and do scan and pack. So, it's definitely a journey that keeps on sort of paying for itself over and over again as you get better and better at it.
That's amazing. And I think too, like, as far as like talking about industry, so we talked a lot about apparel and footwear. I think you guys, I don't know if you want to mention kind of where things are going, but I think it would also be really good to talk about, like, from the e-com standpoint, like the clicks to bricks type companies that are, have a really big digitally native presence, and maybe they're starting to get into brick and mortar, but like, even on that side, like the technology of like being able to scan the items as they're being packed out before the box closes to ensure that you have the 100% right items. I mean, that's tremendous in itself. And what do you guys, how do you see, like, where do you see it going next in terms of like the categories?
Yeah. So early on, as we, again, kind of going back to that crawl, walk, run for retailers, as far as what they've turned on and where they've turned on at. In the early 2000s, we saw apparel being the primary focus, and there's a lot of work that was done in the early days to kind of prove out the ROI and where and what you test. RFID has shortcomings like any technology, that there's challenges when you look at metals or liquids, and so typically those items or those categories have kind of been pushed off. But you saw in the early 2000s apparel, shortly thereafter, footwear and home and soft goods followed. We've seen a really big push now into the general merchandise, so like the CPG space, food and beauty, as the technology has come a really long way, Courtney, as far as tag solutions and being able to read on those challenged items for liquids and food. So there's a lot more going on in the space, still room to grow. But you've kind of seen a really big curve, getting away from, the traditional just we're an apparel and footwear technology to we're really a general merchandise product as well.
Yeah, and we have some super smart engineers working on antenna design and trying to solve this problem. We have a tag that we've used that was developed actually primarily for the pharmaceutical business, because they're starting to do a lot of RFID tagging as well, and it's specifically designed to perform better when it's on a vial with liquid inside it. And so, which is exactly the use case that you need it to be. And so instead of having this liquid as a problem, they're using it to their advantage. And I don't know how the science works, but they do. And so it's pretty cool. But I wanted to kind of circle back a second to the clicks to bricks thing, because there's tons of clicks to bricks companies who, there's all these retail profits out there that are saying, like, you got to have brick and mortar to grow, because once you hit your audience on Instagram, where are you going to go? And so all the clicks people they're so used to getting a ton of data about the customer journey from, e-com. I got it on mobile, and then he went to his tablet, and then he, went to Facebook, and he finally clicked on it, and then he bought it. That's all amazing. And then you can see, like, where in the website you've gone. But once you go into the store, you have absolutely no idea. Right. But RFID can give you some of that information. It can tell you, things like, hey, this person took it to the fitting room and it was purchased, because you can do fitting room analytics. So there's a lot of things you can do, not necessarily on day one, but we have customers that are doing fitting room analytics. We have customers that are like heat mapping of the stores to understand, hey, this, tops and bottoms go better together or whatever. I mean, I'm making that up.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not a merchandiser, but you know what I mean? Like, you can do all those kinds of things, It's the same thing as, like, you should always put milk in the back of the store because it makes people go through the store. So, like, all these kinds of things that people may know intuitively, you can actually prove out with data. So
I think that also kind of goes back to the comment on get it as close to your customer as possible. So when we work with a traditional brick and mortar, we talk about or state, store is where we want to start. Let's get the inventory short up there. But when I work with click to bricks groups, we actually start with as close to their customer, which is, shipping out of the DC. So we set up scan pack stations to make sure that they're having the right accuracy as it goes out, and automate that and speed that up, because typically that's where their biggest bottleneck is they're getting a lot of orders in a very short amount of time, and they have a very short fulfillment time period. So, how can we speed that up and also ensure that they have accuracy? So again, it's kind of looking at how do we get the technology as close to impacting the customer as possible? So clicks, bricks, typically in the unpack process. For brick and mortar retail, it's all right, how do we shore up your inventory accuracy in your actual stores?
That's cool.
Yeah, there's some amazing stuff being done out there, super innovative. For one of our customers in France, it's a women's underwear store. You can literally like sit there, order, and it'll be ready in 15 minutes because the store's upstairs, and then downstairs they have this like massive, absolutely massive warehouse that's a store fulfillment center. And then they have these pneumatic tubes, and you literally like put the order, someone picks it, and then they stick it in this tube, and then it goes into a box, and then you just pick it up. And I went to see it in Paris because I was just like, I couldn't believe it. And so, but the cool thing is they're doing it so fast, and the women's bras are in all different sizes. So when they go to put the order on, there's a verification process, and it gives them a green check mark. It's like, yes, for this order, you picked the right size. And then they package it and stick it up in this tube. And there's some videos on YouTube. I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants to see it. It's just absolutely the coolest thing.
That's very cool. Well, and so when I was at GS1 and I was telling you about the Fast Company speaker I saw earlier, it was really interesting too. He was talking about how, going back to what you were saying, Jonathan, about like, these companies are used to having all this data about like how long did someone look at this one item and linger, and there's none of that in a regular retail store now. But actually There's starting to be like people, you can see if they picked up hair dye and how long did they look at that container of hair dye before they put it back on the counter. And so like, something kept them from buying that item, and you can all of a sudden start kind of looking at more behavior. And that's kind of, I think that's coming. I don't think that's fully here yet with most companies.
No, but I mean, I think there's some really interesting things though. Like, do you take stuff into a fitting room and then the mirror actually then lights up and it knows, hey, you took 5 things in. Do you want a different color? Do you want a different size? Do you want to,
I love that.
You know what? You got this green shirt, but there's an amazing red skirt or black leather pants that are going to make you look killer. And just like, hey, sure. And it's kind of like the suggested on e-com, but you can do it in a brick and mortar store.
That's
not necessarily like a pay the bills ROI, but it's like an amazing bell and whistle that you can add on. So, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do there. It's not even mirrors, cool. There's tablets and stuff too. So, I mean, the challenge is balancing like how creepy is this versus, because you don't want to have people feeling like you're spying on them. But I mean, it's no different than a really good salesperson. It's just a lot easier.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, there's nothing worse than having to like get redressed to go out and get another size of something.
You know what? I've heard that a lot. So.
I would rather it be creepy and convenient for me personally.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a guy, I hate shopping. But yeah, it's absolutely right. And there's some huge value in it. So.
That's cool. Well, so, we had I wanted to talk just very, very quickly about like the ROI, because I think we talked a lot about the ways that other companies are utilizing this. But I think in terms of hard numbers, I think this could really be helpful for people to understand like what, if I were to implement this today, how am I going to actually see a return, and how long is it going to take to see a return? So like, can you just talk a little bit about like the, some of the findings that you guys have so far?
Yeah, I think we could do an entire masterclass on this, Jonathan, right? I feel like we do entire workshops with retailers and brands as far as doing ROI analysis, and we have that capability to help a brand or retailer look at it. This is a study Accenture did, and kind of just some of the highlights from it. I think one that's kind of interesting is, a 9% ROI. And I'll be honest, that number, I've seen it higher in retailers that I've worked with before. And maybe not quite that high with others. But what I will say is it's always been positive. I spend an enormous amount of time when I work with a new retailer or brand who's evaluating and setting what their KPIs should be. What categories should they bring on first? What categories are maybe phase 2? And so there's a lot of industry data out there today, Courtney, that is very public, with Accenture, GS1, and we can help a retailer go through as well. But I will, as I mentioned earlier, just like an item on display brand that I was working with, had double-digit sales increase because their compliance on a display displays being set out was very challenged in the store environment. So depending on the categories that you're looking to launch or move into, I think that number can vary greatly, but ultimately it's always been positive in any brand that we've worked with.
Yeah, and there's a big labor savings, and you're taking a sort of tedious task of taking inventory or doing restocking and making it much quicker, much simpler, and then you can repurpose that labor into spending time with the customers to say, hey, guess what? Let's try this on. Spend more time in the fitting room area, spend more time talking to the customer about what they need. And so there's definitely a huge value for that. And the other thing I would say too is, people talk, I should pilot RFID. I don't think you should be piloting RFID. I think you should be talking or doing a proof of concept. I mean, move towards a pilot and then figure out how to go to full adoption, because, there's been plenty of proofs of concept, right? I mean, holding up these tags here from all these different brands, from retailers, Macy's, Nordstrom, Target, Walmart. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? And so a lot of people are doing it now, and they've seen the value from it. And so the purpose of a pilot isn't to say, does RFID work? But it's like, how's the best way it's going to work for my business, and how can I get it?
Yeah, I mean, candidly to that point, Jonathan, I think that's a lot of the conversations that I have with brands today, is there's not really a reason to go out and do that POC and really prove out the ROI. It's really going back and saying, all right, how do we do what we call a pilot for deployment? So we're working out all the back end systems, all the nuances from their operational processes to be able to scale it for their enterprise. And so we're seeing a big shift from folks wanting to do these traditional POCs to prove out an ROI or to prove out the technology, but now it's more of we're going to do a pilot for deployment.
Yeah. The other thing I would say too is, if you're going to do RFID, start tagging now, right? If you're going to do your project next year, start the process. And it seems kind of silly, like, we're going to waste tags. Well, no, because they got to start in the factory. It takes like 6 months or longer for it to get onshore. And by that time, your project's going to be well underway. And there's nothing more painful than what we call tag up parties, where you have to go into a retail store at the end of the supply chain and start tagging on everything.
Well, that's where we come in. That's what our job is. Our job is to, while it's still in the distribution center, maybe you didn't make it to the factory level, but when it's in the distribution center, let us help with that, 100%.
Right? I have a whole series of photos from the Lululemon project, and the store tagging is so hard, right? Because you have 40,000 items in a typical mall store, and you got to pull every single one of those off the shelf, find them, and take a look at them, and then put a tag on manually, right? And so it's much easier to just start in the factory, where the labor is much less, the time is much less, and it's all part of the process, right? For you to switch from a hang tag to a hang tag with an RFID label on it is a very simple
party
process.
is a very deceiving word, Courtney.
Awesome.
So I would recommend any listeners to definitely push it back to renewal, because party is a very deceiving word for that.
Yeah, I mean, we had to hire a value-added service provider to come in and take every single item off of every single warehouse that we had, every single box, open them all up and put tags on them. And
we live for stuff like that. That's actually, we do millions of units a year of RFID tagging now. And price tag changes, we have absolutely loved COVID, because we love opening up all those boxes and pulling those items out and doing a little something to them. So. Yeah.
Hey, there's value in VAS for sure. So.
Yeah. Well, and so as far as some of the questions that we got so far through this, I just wanted to hit on a couple of them. We're getting a little bit long on time, but let's just hit a couple. And then I guess if anyone has any questions after this is over, they can always reach out to us. But as far as how long does it actually take to launch an RFID program?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Takes the courage to say go.
Yeah, I mean, as Jonathan mentioned, the tag up, there's a couple different work streams that we help, retailers and brands work through. So you have the tagging piece, but then you're going to also have the software piece that needs to be done. So the long pull in that is getting products tagged. And so as Jonathan mentioned, as soon as you can say go, so we can start getting things tagged upstream, be it out of like a renewal or start getting it tagged at source. So you can start having that flow in, and at some point you're going to need to then trigger a tag up in store to get your aged product tagged up. So that's typically the long pull. The software has come a long ways in that they can stand up much quicker. Everything being cloud-based has really helped that. So I don't know. I could say it's a 6 months or 8 month project. It's hard to say, Courtney, because every retailer has their own nuances. But that's something that we could always sit and talk about. What are we looking at tagging and what the timeline looks like, because it's kind of not a one size fits all approach.
Gotcha.
You can stand up a pilot.
Correct.
Very, very quickly if you just tagging one store. And what we did at Lululemon, we actually had a 10-store pilot running for a year. And so we did diversion in the DC. And so it's like, okay, for store number 10, 11, and 14, when those boxes are heading towards that, divert it over to like a VAS area where they're actually being reworked to put tags on. So, but like I said, like Under Armour, they made the decision when they started the project, okay, we're going to start tagging, because that process isn't like it's easy to do, but if you have 400 factories or 1,000 factories or 10,000 factories, it's, doing anything takes time, right? And so that's where we shine, actually, because we actually have people in Asia, we have people in South America, we got people in Africa, we got people all across the US that can help with that are factory experts. And so they go to them, they can assess, hey, do you want to print it locally? Do you want to do it in our service bureau? And we have service bureaus like all around. I'm just speaking to our team in Sri Lanka, where pretty much everyone, all of women's underwear is made in Sri Lanka, basically. Like it's pretty amazing. So, and so like our team is like right there in the center of all these other factories, and they print RFID tags and then they distribute them out to all the different factories for use. So. Okay,
that's awesome. And then as far as like, who needs to be involved in like coming up with an RFID program, like who would be the main stakeholders that you would want to involve in those conversations?
So RFIDs are really cross-functional, and John may agree with me here from your experience as well. It's really a cross-functional program. At the end of the day, you're impacting the merchants. They have a COGS. You're adding some costs by adding RFID to their product, and so getting the merchants involved, making sure they understand the benefits of RFID and what it will bring to them. As a division, working with obviously IT, retail operations, supply chain. So when we go in and work with a retail brand, we actually help stand up that steering committee and bring all the cross-functional leaders and ensure that we set up the right KPIs and the right actions that each group or division have to be a part of, and then make sure that throughout the process of piloting and deploying RFID, that all those cross-functional groups stay involved. It's really common for a retail brand to work very siloed sometimes. And in RFID, because it's literally touching everything from the merchants to supply chain to retail operations, it's really key, Courtney, to make sure that you set up that steering committee, you bring in all the cross-functional leaders, you have their buy-in, and then everyone kind of has their marching orders as to who owns the project, and then who's making and executing on the actions they need to take.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, at Lululemon, we had a steering committee that was like all C-level. So it was the CFO, the CMO, the CIO, all on it, right? And then, I had to present every month, okay, what's the status? Red, green. Okay, well, it's green in the factories, but it's red in the stores. Okay, how can you, help me out, store operations people? Right. And so, we had a couple of teams underneath that. It was like the DC team, and then there was a store operations team that was doing training. And so, I mean, it's a project, right? Like you have to treat it as a project. It can't be done as a side of the desk thing. It can't be like, oh, I'm part-time involved with this. At the end of the project, when things were super hairy and we were accelerating towards the finish line, we brought all of the sort of doers into one room, and we just like put them all there. And so when the phone would ring from the store, it would be like, is this a technical question or is this a procedural question? And then that doesn't matter. And we could just move the call to somebody who could answer that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's like when we've come in and started working with brands and we take over part of their distribution. It's the same thing. It's like you sell someone who agrees to this idea or comes to you and wants you to do something, but then really your job is to sell everyone in the company below that. Like the sales process does not stop when a contract is signed. That's when it starts. And so like you have to like really educate and continue to educate what that value is and how can you help me help you, like how can we help you to get this off the ground. You're going to see all this amazing value to it, but it really is a process of like continuing to make people just see what it is you're trying to do and not just what, but the why and the how, so I can totally see what you're saying. I can only imagine. And so I guess another question that people have is how expensive is it to deploy an RFID program?
I'd say how expensive is it to not deploy it? Honestly, but you're spending all this money that you don't even realize that you're spending on all these manual things, from labor in a store to paying third-party auditors to count the stuff that you can count automatically. So, it goes back to the three legs of the stool, and, everything has a variety in price. And I certainly would never quote pricing from my partners because pricing varies based off of a bunch of different things, bells and whistles that you turn on in the software. But like Daniel said, it's cloud-based, it's per month per store. So that part's there. These handhelds are very low cost. Typically, you need one or two of them in a store with a good, robust break fix program in case they get dropped and broken. And then the tag piece, which varies depending on if you want a tag with color in it or you want a fairly simple tag from Levi's, where so there's a variety of different things. So typically we talk it's like a net add-on to your tag that you're already doing. So and so your tag that you're doing may already have a cost to it. And so it's like a little bit more. But, sometimes I'm shocked, like when I say to people, how much do you think an RFID tag costs? And they'll say, I don't know, 50 cents, $1. I'm like, it's nowhere near that expensive. And so, the pricing very much depends on volume. And so that's kind of, the conversation that we can have and we can help you figure out what is the best one for you. And go from there.
That's awesome. So it's really not that much technology outside of the tags. I mean, you have the software and then you have a few scanners, it sounds like, and some applications may be different, right, like the tunnels and things, but just in a regular store environment.
Yeah, and you don't have to do tunnels right away, right? I mean, going back to Daniel's crawl, walk, run, I mean, all you need is some handhelds in the store and then the software and, a good company that can help you deploy that at across all your stores. So, I mean, you probably have to touch every store. You may need to do a survey of every store, but you haven't done a store survey recently. You may need to put in a few extra Wi-Fi access points. Definitely had to do that in a few places. But the technology has evolved a lot. You used to have to do shielding to separate the back room from the front room. You really don't need to do that anymore. So the costs to do RFID from when I did it at Lululemon,
yeah, I mean, I even go back, Jonathan. I mean, 12 plus years ago when I got involved in RFID, when I was on the retailer side, I mean, have just completely evolved. As you mentioned, we were back then, we were having to shield back rooms to be able to have that front room, back room. Today, that's not being done. And that in and of itself was an enormous capital investment for us as an organization. But things like the software, moving to the cloud have made it much more economical. The sensor or the tag piece has become much more economical because you're seeing broader adoption. So as all things, volumes cures, some of those challenges. So you definitely have seen a big evolution where I think 12 plus years ago, it was really a program that was meant for large organizations who had R&D budgets to deploy these type of things. But now you're seeing organizations like a Southern Fried Cotton, who has an amazing story about what they've done in their distribution center. It's a mom and pop clothing brand who had a tag RFID for one of their wholesale accounts. And they looked at it and said, what's in it for us? Like, how can we implement and use this and improve our own operational processes. And this is not a large organization with deep pockets to do R&D, and very in a very cost effective way, we're able to set up a way in which they audit all of their outbound shipments and improve their accuracy from a shipping and pack perspective through RFID, and had less than an 8-month payback on what they did. So it's really not meant for the big guys anymore. It's really, we're seeing adoptions at all sizes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think one of the other questions around price that's related to it is, what's the lowest priced item you've ever seen tagged with an RFID tag? And so these are like real life samples. This says $3.90 on it. And so, yeah, it's right down here next to my camera likes it to shuffle. But anyway, it'll almost come into focus as soon as I do it. But you can trust me on that. This one says $15. So you can see that one. And then this is like $9.99. So like, it doesn't have to be a $100 pair of pants, right? It definitely, usually what the retailers do is they make a decision based off of a department, or they say, we're doing the whole store, depending on the type of retailer you are. And so, it depends on what your average unit retail is. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think this has been a really fun for me anyway, because I'm a little geeky like that. But I think everyone else is out there that has any interest in this is going to really love this conversation too, because it's just eye-opening how much this technology is in use, and the fun ways that you can kind of deploy it and the money that you can save from it. Like a 10%, an ROI of 10% to me, or 9%. That's a big number for a lot of companies. I mean, a big number. So I think it's really great. So I just want to thank you guys so much for coming today and doing this with us. And I'll send you the questions, or I guess actually we'll pop up a slide that has like our QR code on it so that people can see how to get in touch with us. And then if anyone has questions afterwards, they can just reach out directly. But it's been great.
Yeah,
it's been
feel free to contact us on LinkedIn or whatever. I mean, we'd love to talk to people about this stuff.
That's awesome. All right. Sounds good. Well, y'all have a great afternoon.
Thanks,
and thank you again. Take care.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for your time. Appreciate it.
Bye.